The house settled into its usual late-night quiet, the only light coming from the muted glow of the television flickering across Frank's face. He sat in his worn leather recliner, the day's fatigue a physical weight on his shoulders. The silence of the house used to be a comfort, a reward after a long shift. Now, it just felt empty, a space that needed to be filled. He picked up his phone, the screen a small, bright promise in the dim room. His thumb swiped through the gallery, each photo a small jolt of warmth against the cold loneliness. Lyra. There she was, on a white sand beach, the sun catching the highlights in her long, dark hair. Her smile was wide, aimed just for him through the camera lens. He had sent her the money for that trip to Palawan. "For a little vacation, my love," he'd typed. "You deserve it." Another photo, a selfie this time, her head tilted, with a digital sticker of a heart floating by her cheek. Seeing her happy, seeing the picture she sent just for him, made the overtime shifts feel like a worthy sacrifice. It felt like he was an active part of her life, even from 8,000 miles away. He was helping her live a life she couldn't have otherwise. He was her hero. A notification banner slid across the top of the screen, pulling him from his thoughts. A new message from My Lyra, heart. His heart gave a familiar little skip. Lyra. "Hi, my love. Are you busy? I hope you are having a good day." A genuine smile spread across his face as he typed back, his thumbs surprisingly nimble. Frank. "Never too busy for you. Just got home. Long day. Seeing your message makes it all better." The three little dots appeared, a silent drumbeat of anticipation. This was his favorite part of the day. The little back and forth, the sweet nothings that bridged the vast, unforgiving ocean between them. The dots vanished. Lyra. "I am glad I make you happy. You make me happy too. My love, I am sorry to ask you again, but Grandma is not feeling well. The doctor said she needs new medicine. It is very expensive here." Frank's smile tightened at the edges. His stomach did a familiar, slow clench, a feeling he'd learned to ignore. It was just last month it was for her cousin's university tuition. The month before that, a new tin roof for the family home after a typhoon that, for some reason, never seemed to make the international news. He closed his eyes for a second. The image of her smiling face still burned onto the back of his eyelids. The guys at work would have a field day with this. He could hear them already, a chorus of "sucker," "fool," "old man being taken for a ride." But they didn't see the way she looked at him during their video calls, her eyes full of what he could only describe as adoration. They didn't get the long, rambling messages she sent about the mundane details of her day, the ones that made him feel truly connected, needed. She wasn't just some girl. She was his Lyra. They were building a life together. This was just what you did for family. He was the man, the provider. It was his duty, his pleasure, to take care of her. He opened his eyes and typed, "Frank, how much?" Lyra. "It is 10,000 pesos. I am so sorry, my love. I feel so bad to ask." He did the quick math. About $200. It would make the end of the month tight, but he could manage. He could pack his lunch every day, maybe put off getting the car's oil changed for another few weeks. Frank. "Don't be sorry. Family is everything. I'll send it now." He navigated away from her picture, the warmth of her smile already fading, and opened the Western Union app. Its bright yellow logo felt almost accusatory. He tapped through the menus, his fingers moving with a practiced, almost robotic efficiency. Philippines, 10,000 PHP. His credit card information was already saved. He pressed his thumb to the sensor to authorize the transaction. A green check mark appeared. "Your transfer is on its way." He screenshotted the confirmation receipt and sent it to her. His phone, the anchor of his new life, suddenly felt heavy in his hand. He switched back to her photo, the one on the beach, and tried to recapture the feeling from a few minutes ago, The pride, the joy, the feeling of being a winner. But staring at her smiling face now, a new, colder feeling seeped in. It was the quiet hum of the transaction, the digital echo of the money leaving his account, and it sounded less like building a future and more like a bill being paid. The reply came almost instantly, a canned-looking thank you message with a string of heart and prayer emojis. Thank you, my love. You are my savior. Grandma will be so happy. He'd expected more. A picture of the medicine, maybe a short video of her on the way to the pharmacy. Something tangible. Instead, a few minutes later, another message arrived. I am going to sleep now, my love. It is very late here. I love you. Frank stared at the screen. Her messages felt clipped, transactional. The warmth from their earlier exchange was gone, replaced by an abrupt finality that left him feeling strangely hollow. He pushed the feeling down. It was late there. Of course she was tired. A few days later, the unease was still a low hum in the back of his mind. He called her, needing to see her face, to recalibrate. The video connected, pixelating into focus. Lyra was there, her smile as bright as ever, but something was off. She said she was at home, watching over her grandmother, but the background was a brightly lit, sterile-looking wall he didn't recognize, and he could hear the faint, tinny sound of pop music. How's Grandma? He asked, trying to keep his tone light. Oh, she is much better, my love. The new medicine is working, Lyra said, her eyes flicking to something off-screen. She seemed distracted, her focus elsewhere. That's great. I was worried, Frank said, leaning into the camera, trying to close the distance. I miss you. I miss you too, my love, she replied, the words sounding a little too rehearsed. Her gaze drifted away again. Oh, my cousin is calling me to dinner. I have to go. Talk to you tomorrow? I love you. The screen went black before he could even say it back. He sat in the silence, the abruptness of the call hanging in the air. Her cousin? He thought she was staying in to take care of her grandmother. And the music. It sounded like it was coming from a cafe, not a sick room. He shook his head, a familiar wave of self-recrimination washing over him. He was overthinking it, reading into things that weren't there. The connection was bad. She was probably just in a different room of the house. Later that night, unable to sleep, he found himself scrolling through her social media profile, a page she rarely updated and had told him was mostly for family. He clicked on a photo album from a few months back labeled Palawan 2026. His trip, the one he'd paid for. He smiled, clicking through the images of the pristine beaches and sunsets he'd made possible for her. He was halfway through when he froze. It was a group photo. Lyra was in the middle, laughing, her head thrown back. Her arm was linked with a young Filipino man, his hand resting casually, familiarly, on her waist. Frank's thumb hovered over the screen, his world shrinking to the size of that single image. He zoomed in. The man was handsome, around her age, with a confident smile. They looked good together. They looked right. He scrolled furiously through the rest of the album, but the man wasn't in any other pictures. It was just that one shot, buried in the middle of 24 solo poses and scenic views. A mistake. She must have uploaded it by accident. He tried to rationalize it. A cousin, a friend of the family, a tour guide. But the way his hand sat on her hip felt like an anchor, pulling Frank down into a cold, dark place. He closed the app, his heart hammering against his ribs. The silence of the house was no longer empty. It was filled with the deafening roar of his own doubt. He looked at his phone, at the last message she'd sent. I love you. And for the first time, the words felt like a lie. The doubt was a virus. Once it entered his system, it replicated, infecting every interaction. Frank started seeing things he'd previously ignored. He noticed the same phrasing in her messages that he'd seen in online forums discussing romance scams. The term, my love, began to sound less like an endearment and more like a salutation on a business letter. He started replying with deliberate vagueness when she asked for money, offering excuses instead of confirmations. The tone of her messages shifted in lockstep. The sweet, patient Lyra was replaced by someone anxious, almost demanding. The love-filled paragraphs shrank to clipped, one-sentence questions. "So you cannot help?" The tipping point wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. Frank had called in sick, the gnawing anxiety in his gut making it impossible to face the jeers of his coworkers. He was doing what had become his new obsession, digitally excavating Lyra's life. He found the man from the Palawan photo. His name was Marco. His profile was public, and it was a timeline of the life Frank thought he was funding. There was a picture of Lyra with a new iPhone, the one Frank had sent money for just last week. The caption, in Tagalog, translated to, "My baby works so hard." There were photos of them in expensive restaurants, on dates at the mall, wearing new clothes. It was all there, a meticulously documented parallel life paid for by him. But the final, crushing blow came from a different photo. It was a candid shot of Lyra and her grandmother, the one who was perpetually in need of expensive medicine. They were sitting on the steps of a newly renovated house, the one with the new tin roof Frank had financed. Her grandmother looked radiant, healthy, and was laughing, holding up a sleek new tablet. In the photo's comments, a friend had asked Lyra in Tagalog, "Wow, another one? How many do you have now?" Lyra's reply was a string of laughing emojis followed by a single sentence. "You need more than one fisherman if you want to eat every day." Frank read the translated words again and again. Fisherman. The clinical, detached term landed with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't personal. It was a business model. He wasn't a fool who had been tricked by one manipulative girl. He was a client of a small, family-run enterprise. He hadn't been building a future. He had been a procurement vehicle. The power dynamic, which he thought was so clearly in his favor, the man with the money, the provider, was a complete illusion. He held no power at all. He was just a resource, interchangeable with the German, the Australian, or whoever else was in her inbox. All the words, the "I love yous," the "my loves," the promises of a future together. They were just the cost of doing business, the user interface for the transaction. The action, the simple, cold transfer of funds, was the only thing that had ever been real. He looked at his own reflection in the blank phone screen. The face staring back wasn't a hero or a king. It was just a fisherman who had finally realized he wasn't the one holding the pole. He was the catch. He didn't smash the phone. He didn't fire off an angry, all-caps message demanding an explanation. The rage he had anticipated, the explosive catharsis he felt he was owed, never came. It was replaced by a quiet, hollow hum. The gears of the machine had been exposed, and the only sound they made was a dull, mechanical whir. The anger, he realized, had been part of the fantasy, the righteous fury of a man wronged. But he hadn't been wronged. He had been serviced. He thought of the guys at work, their crude jokes about mail-order brides and old fools. He'd always felt superior to their cynicism, insulated by the purity of his feelings. Now he saw that their mockery was just a different kind of transaction, a way to process the same fundamental truth. They saw the game for what it was, even if they couldn't articulate it beyond a locker room jibe. They were spectators, but he had bought a lifetime ticket and walked onto the field, convinced he was the quarterback, never realizing he was the ball. His phone buzzed, a new message from My Lyra, Heart. The name on the screen was a relic of a story he no longer believed. "Hi, my love. I haven't heard from you. Is everything okay? I am worried. He stared at the words. The programming was flawless. A lapse in communication had triggered the concern protocol. He wasn't a person to her. He was a subscription that was threatening to lapse. The game wasn't about love and lies. It was simpler. It was about inputs and outputs. His loneliness and money were the input. Her carefully curated affection was the output. There was no real malice in it. No more than a vending machine feels malice when it takes $1 and dispenses a soda. He could stop, of course, block the number, let the silence rush back in, colder and more absolute than before. He could face the emptiness of his house and the even greater emptiness of his own ego. He could accept that he was not a hero, not a savior, not even a fool. He was just a consumer. And in a world of endless, empty consumption, what was one more meaningless purchase? He held his thumb over the Western Union app, then paused. He swiped back to her message. He thought about the fisherman and the catch. He thought about the clear, brutal honesty of her business model. For a moment, he felt a strange, chilling sense of respect. She understood the rules. Now, so did he. He wasn't the fisherman, and he wasn't the catch. He was just another tourist, finally realizing the postcard was more beautiful than the place.